For decades, professionals have relied on best practices in their particular realms as the safest bets for growth, efficiency, and transformation. But what happens when AI changes the rules so fast that best practices are already outdated by the time you implement them? Is it time to throw out the old playbooks and start writing new ones? Hey, ChatGPT, can you help me out with this new best practices for marketing playbook? Hi, I'm Courtney Baker, and this is AI Know-How from Knownwell, helping you reimagine your business in the AI era. As always, I'm joined by Knownwell CEO David DeWolf, Chief Product and Technology Officer Mohan Rao, and Nordlight CEO Pete Buer. We also have an interview with Andy Sitison, who joins us to talk about how your company can approach applying AI for human-centered change, ethics, and transformation, not just for productivity. But first, Pete Buer is off this week, so we're going to welcome David DeWolf to the studio to break down some of the latest in AI news. Pete Buer is out of the office, so we're going to get David DeWolf's perspective on this week in the news segment. David, thanks for filling in.
I mean, it took me over 100 episodes to be able to wiggle myself into the most fun part. I do feel like I have big shoes to fill. Pete's a lot smarter than I am, but this feels like a lot of fun to me. I love reacting to the real time, what's going on in the world with AI.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me.
so curious to get your take. And with that, I think I'm going to give you a fun one out of the gate. I want to start with a story that puts the scale of AI's impact into perspective. Walmart CEO Doug McMillon said recently that AI is going to change literally every job at the company. That's over 2 million people, from cashiers to corporate staff. What should leaders take away from a statement like that?
Well, Courtney, I think we have to start by putting this in perspective like you did, but I want to put some numbers on it, right? Walmart, you are absolutely right, is one of the world's biggest employers. Well, that is 2 million employees, right? 1.6 million in the US alone. I think it's really, really critical that we think about that and how big they are. Now, when you have the CEO of one of the largest employers in the world that employs 2 million people saying that your job is going to change no matter what job it is that you're holding, I think we have to pick our heads up and notice that and say we are moving from a period of experimentation to a period of implementation where we are beginning to see CEOs not only demand ROI, but to paint the picture of how it's going to roll out and to be able to set those expectations. Now, what I'm really encouraged by is in this announcement, there weren't these kind of hyperbolic statements of we're going to do mass layoffs or this is how many people is going to. No, it was just a very measured, every single job is going to change. And I do believe that matches what we are seeing as AI rolls out, right? What we're seeing is everybody's job actually transforms and it changes. And we still need their expertise. We still need that role. But in order to do our jobs better, in order to do them more efficiently, there are new approaches, new tools, new processes, new systems we have to think through. And so I think this can be kind of a bellwether for other businesses to just take a peek at and say, okay, if the largest employer in the world, 2 million employees, is saying every single person's job is going to change, how do I begin to think that same way? And not just look at one department and how much headcount can I change? No, how do I actually take and reskill every single employee? And how do I embed AI in my default thinking of how I am going to do my job? And that doesn't mean every single task, right? There are things that are uniquely human, but it does mean recognizing that everybody is impacted by this technology. And as leaders, as employees, as just human beings, we have to start to recognize that we live in a totally different world.
Yeah, absolutely. Such an interesting story. And man, it'll be interesting to see as you think about what this could look like for Walmart. Do they get ahead of the competition quickly? Kind of reimagine the whole experience and what that might look like. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah. Courtney, I think the key thing of what you just said is reimagining that experience. It's all about opportunity. And it's one of the ways I really appreciate that Doug actually communicated this. He talked about the opportunity, the goal to create opportunity for everybody, right? And I think that's an important thing for leaders to think about is the communication, the message. How do we roll out this type of transformative change? I think it needs to be framed in a way of opportunity, not just slash and burn and cut and looking for cost savings. That's
Yeah.
where it's gone upside down.
I mean, you can really imagine, like, what if Walmart becomes there's like 2 times as many Walmarts as there are today, and they're more centrally located to residences, so it's quicker and there's less
Totally.
staff there because AI is I mean, you could just, like, go on, imagining what it could mean and maybe even a much more profitable company.
Absolutely. Delivering more value to customers.
Yep, I could use a grocery store in the front of this neighborhood, I can tell you that. David, thank you as always. Lean and Six Sigma in operations and supply chain, Agile and Scrum in software development, NPS and CSAT in professional services. In the era where AI is rewriting how work gets done in real time, what's the shelf life of a best practice? I sat down with David and Mohan recently to get their thoughts. David, Mohan, hey, how are you? Y'all good?
Oh, hi. How are you?
Wow.
I'm good.
Doing great.
Actually, everybody on this call knows I'm the one that's not good, because I just made a rack of technology over here. Speaking of technology, you 2 for decades, everybody, business leaders, we've all been talking about best practices. What are they? How, if we're not there, how do we get there? If we're there, how do we continue to improve? It's kind of been the benchmark, but in the age of AI, best practices and business as usual may actually be impediments to growth in this transitional time. What worked yesterday obviously could be obsolete or already obsolete, and you just don't even realize it yet. So, David Mohan, I'd love to dig into why success in the AI era demands a new playbook. Or to put it maybe a little bit differently, the ability to continually rewrite your company's playbook as you go. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, there's always been a lot of different opinions around best practices, and obviously they have a place in corporate America, and in businesses. But I think a lot of the arguments against over indexing on best practices have really come to life with AI. And one of the staples that I think of is that best practices in general are static by nature, right? Of course, there is a long term ability to update them and have the newest latest, but just the concept of best practices is this long term thing of like, here's how we do things. And we are now living in an age of AI where things evolve so rapidly and there's so much breakthrough that I think that is exacerbated in this era. The other thing is, I think that has been a complaint against best practices is it limits innovation and really mastery, right? Best practices are in place for situations where we need to know what good looks like. They don't necessarily enable people to understand the underlying values and principles and then leverage those to create the best solution, right? Or to innovate and to come up with new ideas. And so because of that, they're often misplaced. There are frameworks that have good meaning, but they can be used in ways that undermine the optimal solution in a situation. And I think in the AI era, those fundamental complaints about best practices are just exacerbated and taken to the next level.
Yeah, best practices that were rooted in first principles were always good and they're still good. It's just that when they become a static checklist of this is what you shall do, and when they get embedded and crustified in an organization, that's the problem. The good news is AI lives in constant change. Any good AI system should be constantly adapting, and that's why there is so much energy about agentic architectures because agents are not predetermined set of steps, but are adapting to the context and the situation. So in that sense, best practices needs a reboot. And in the AI era, it's all about adapting to the context of the situation.
It's interesting, Mohan, when you talk about agentic and those structures being built differently. But right now, I can imagine as people are listening to this and they're like, yeah, but those frameworks for like the layperson, maybe in teams that are not technologists, it's so much work to maintain those and they break, they're very brittle. What is your like recommendation or is there hope for those of us that are
Yeah.
not technologists?
Yeah, when we are calling for end of best practices, it doesn't mean chaos, right? What it really means is it's a discipline of constant reinvention. It's the discipline based on first principles. That's what's is important. So the static rubric of here is how we do things, and everybody in the company shall follow. That could be really an efficient way to not produce what you want, but having something that's adaptive is what we're looking for. In effect, creating learning context each time where the company gets better each week and each iteration
Mhm.
is what you're looking for. And these are things that we've done in certain disciplines before, not really well. You can do it in some situations, but the question is, how do you use AI to make that better and better and better?
I think to your point, AI really has the ability to help us contextualize. And really, that contextualization is a big piece of what we've been talking about that makes best practices rigid, right? Is they're developed in isolation. They are put out there as frameworks or the quote, best way to do something for everyone and all peoples, right? And we all know that rarely are organizations or situations cookie cutter. And so, what you end up with is a good enough solution that works as opposed to maximizing the solution. And I think AI, to your point, because for the first time we're really digitizing the knowledge work, and we have the ability to infer based on the contextualized information, we can now come up with next practices, right? Whatever it is, it's the contextualized. What is it that is the quote best practice, the next practice for this situation right here, given all of the surrounding context? And all of a sudden, we have tailored solutions that are based on learnings from the past, which is
Yeah.
absolutely what you want. If you think about your highest performers, the highest performers aren't just replicating what they did in previous jobs and say, well, I did it here this way, so I'm going to do it here. No, they understand the fundamental principles behind why it worked. They understand how it applies to this new situation, and they are able to tailor make the solution for the contextualized situation at hand. And I think that's what we want. And we may now have the ability to really embrace AI to help further that and take this entire concept to the next level.
Yeah, I think this is such an interesting conversation. I think for everybody listening, you may come back to this episode the next time you hear somebody say, well, we've always done it this way. That may be a flag that, hey, we need to frame this up differently, this new era. What you really need more of in this AI era is people who are asking, why have we always done it this way? And what could we do now that we have AI? How could this look different? David, Mohan, thank you as always. That
Thank
was
you,
really high
Courtney. Thanks,
touch.
David.
Hey, Courtney, that's a wrap.
Oh my gosh. Too many firms are still chasing new logos while hidden churn quietly drains their revenue. At Knownwell, we believe exponential growth starts with the clients you already have. If you're interested in seeing your data on the Knownwell platform to find out exactly what commercial intelligence can do in your business, go to knownwell.com or just send me a message on LinkedIn. Andy Sitison is the CTO of Share More Stories, as well as a startup founder and advisor. I recently got the chance to talk with him about how you can ensure your company supports and amplifies human experience in the age of AI. Hey, Andy, welcome to the show. To get started, I would love if you could just give a quick introduction of yourself and where AI fits into your story.
That's a great opportunity for me to talk for 10 minutes, and I will not do that. I've been doing tech for over 30 years. I've always been in emerging tech, and I've always been about people, process, and technology, how they all come together. But let me tell you about the AI side of this equation, and that is after doing a global run of high tech, I really started looking at the merger, the crossroads where human and digital meet. And I said, I really want to start allowing the humans to ride on top of the technology and not find themselves under it. And so AI seemed like it's 2016. It was a good timing for machine learning. And I was an old data management guy. So I dove in, spent 4 months just training myself on all the techniques and tools, and been at it since. We have a little startup that we've spun up around it.
One thing I wanted to talk to you about was, you've spent decades at the intersection of business, data, and technology. From your vantage point, how can leaders ensure AI supports transformation that makes organizations more human and not less?
I'll get existential a little bit and say it's similar to capitalism or any other tool or technique. It is a productive tool, but somewhat devoid of value, right? Like it is
Mm.
what we make of it. And we need society, we need groups, we need teams to and cultures to, round that out. And humans are who define that. Like I have spent over 30 years in the tech integration automation world. I've been hearing every year that we're going to lose all our jobs next year, and no one's ever lost a job. Or no, that's not fair. Somebody's lost a job, but we never have seen the market change in a manner that jobs just completely go away because of the new technology. And so I don't think AI does that either. Although it absolutely transforms what you need to be as a human in the future of business, in the future of organizations, public business, public work, and so forth. And so I would tell companies, I heard your question. I'll get to it now. Finally, and that is that to apply AI first is to treat it cellularly. It's not a stack. It's not a login. It is something that can augment anything. It's almost like treat it like a service dog. If you look at all your employees and all your business processes, what needed a service dog? What's not quite getting done right? What's not
Mm.
managed well? What's more complex than you can handle? And then ask the question, could AI enable us in
Mhm.
that one piece? Because it's really it's not a stack. It is a stack, but it's more like timeshare on a mainframe, like in the old days. That's really the way we're treating it right now. And the way it's productive is when it's just enabling the people that are already in your organization, and they need to have the skills to do that. You have to have a team to it's almost like a training function more than a deployment function. It's like, how do you train people to understand how to use it, when to trust it, when to check quality, all that. And of course, we do a lot of deployment work where we're just structuring that data quality and locking down what those systems will do, so that our researchers will not have to do that on their own.
That's so interesting. I would love to talk to you a little bit about your work at Share More Stories. I think it's so interesting, your work there. You use AI to surface not just sentiment, but really those deeper drivers and emotion in people's narratives. How does that kind of story driven insight change the way organizations make decisions compared to, let's say, dashboards and KPIs alone?
You're doing a good job of staging why we exist, and that is, if you look at qualitative versus quantitative data, we have so much data right now. There's so much noise in every aspect of our life, and there's also decent signal in the metrics that a CMO or CXO or even a CIO will see coming through the desk, but often when you're looking at that data, it's still difficult to feel connected to these people. You're tracking activities, you're tracking surveys. Well, gosh, I'm getting a Likert scale of I really hate it, I really love it. But what does that really mean? Like, and was I in a bad mood when I did that review, or did I really mean what I said? Right? Like, there's just so much challenge to the veracity of that data and to find the deeper soul of that community inside those. I call 'em monkey clicks. It's kind of a rude term, but I
Yeah.
just I just can see the monkeys sitting there clicking all the buttons, right? And so it's all valuable. I'm not saying that's not valuable, but what we're finding is, and we started 8 plus years ago doing this, so it's what's good is the market's catching up with us finally. We're not just "Hey, that's really interesting," but people are going, "Oh my god, I need you this week."
So, one thing that you've said previously about safeguarding authenticity and identity is core to your work in a world where generative AI can easily kind of distort voices, fabricate personas. How can organizations protect the integrity of the people they serve?
Wow. It's a really interesting topic because
Yeah.
algorithmically, we're all getting put in buckets, right? We're all marketing buckets. As they say, if you're not paying for it, you are the product, right?
Right.
And we are definitely the product right now in so many ways, to the point where sometimes you don't feel oriented. I would tell you that our customers want to know who is out there. They've all done the work with the personas. They've all defined their segmentations, and no, they don't not know their customer base. They just
Yeah.
don't think they care about. And one thing that's always surprising is they'll get in the processing of the name share more stories, and then you tell them what you're doing, and then you get in there, and then they get just a couple weeks in and get a story or two, and they're like, "Oh my god, these are stories." We're like, "Hey, yeah, that's what we said we're going to collect with it, stories." And but this one's like this person talks about going to the Y and it was her recovery from her mother dying in her arms, and she became and I can't believe we're getting this content. And so I don't want to downplay in any way what we hear from those stories, but the person has the autonomy to name themselves however they want. And that becomes their identifiable connection to the story and their demographics. And in that space, we also don't necessarily share all the content of those stories with our sponsors or allow them to carry that forward to publication of any sort, unless that's part of the initial part of the project where we agree, get our participants to agree, "Hey, are you willing to share your content further?" And if they say no, they don't get to use it. So it's not surprising, it's therapeutic for people to tell their story. It's a voice for them. And a lot of people do want to get that voice out there. They do want their story shared, whether it's with their name or not.
There's a whole new box of AI ethics. It can feel more abstract or like a compliance driven thing when we think about AI ethics. What are, some practical ethical considerations leaders should keep in mind if they want their AI initiatives not to erode trust, not to erode, the ethics that they most likely feel very strongly about?
Yeah, I think one is assigning leadership. Chief experience officers are a hot new C level
Yeah.
that we're seeing all over the place, and that, by the way, helps us a lot because people finally understand what we do, and so that's good. But I think it's very much about it's not a free ride. It's not a one button push tool set that you're implementing. You got to care about your culture, your people, your customers, and that needs to be systemic in your process. Most companies care about that, although I've seen a few that really didn't. They might do a step or two to make it look like they care. but most care about that. It's just a matter of how do you do it, and then it's a function of improvement. It's transformation. It's just like everything we've ever done. It's just like when we went from typewriters to word processors and document management systems in the cloud. It's really about how does this enable your business. The thing about AI, even though it's sometimes immense and vast, its amount of training, it's still just trained on images and labeled data, supervised data. So it only knows what it knows. And it may get it right. It may not get it right. So the further you take it from its core capabilities, the more you get the hallucinations, as they like to call it. And so you get it's a function of learning how to use the tool. It's just like hiring an employee.
Yeah.
The employee than IT. If you're using it, know that you've got training to do. You've got management of that person to do. You've got some care and TLC to do with that technique or technology that you're deploying. So, you know, get to know it, understand how to challenge it, and know how to limit it from hurting you, because it is so dynamic. I mean, 10 years from now, it's not going to matter. But right now, it's really about you got to look at the data quality. You got to look at the boundaries of how you apply it. And, you know, I'm beat around that bush enough. I think I covered it one way or the other.
Well, Andy, we always like to ask at the end of our interviews for a little advice from you. So if you're a CEO, CIO, CHRO listening right now, what's one move you'd recommend they make in the next 12 months to apply AI in a way that really advocates some of these things that we've been talking about with ethics, authenticity, and human-centered change while still, delivering business impact?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm looking at a center of excellence around that. I think a COE strategy is pretty good. You need to have some competence in the house, but that's not just an IT team. That's not like, don't let the CTO like me get a hold of it and think, okay, we're going to teach you all the tech
Right.
and the punditcy and all that. I tell people I'm a practical AI deployer. I'm not an AI pundit. Don't ask me what the freshest model is. I won't know because I deploy this stuff. And so I would say it's about having a center of knowledge around this and a training program. People don't naturally know how to use creative tools. It's just like if you rolled out a bunch of magic markers to your company, you might get a little art, you might get a lot of graffiti, you don't know what you're gonna get because they need to know how to use it, and that's, closer to AI than, think electronic spreadsheets, I think, in the
Yeah.
'80s, whatever. So, I think it's really about considering the well-roundedness of how it fits in your group, consulting around that, being able to go in and talk and listen and then educate people on it, and then measure how it helps you. Like spend a little time going, do we save 20% of time? Do we learn new things? Do we grow our revenue? It's standard business stuff. It's just a new one. It's a new piece to play with.
That's so interesting when you were using that analogy of rolling out some markers. It's obviously if we were to roll out Photoshop to the whole company and
Mm,
ask for an outcome from it, there would be a portion that would excel and do very well. There would be a big group in the middle that, they may, they got something. And then another group at the end that just would totally, they'd be good to get the canvas up and going. But obviously we know that so innately, with a tool like Photoshop. It's so interesting even with the large language models that because it is so language driven, we just kind of assume, I think, that hey, everybody's going to get this. It's just your
right.
prompting and it's not. I mean, it's exactly what you said of like training, giving people the tools to really do this well and not taking it for granted that it is easy for
I think
everyone.
it's a really great point, and I'll give you some strong data on that. I presented at a conference recently. I thought it was mostly science and researchers. And I went in with what I thought was a reasonably basic layout of what generative AI was and how to do prompt
Yeah.
engineering, some really, I thought, basic with full demo, go along the lecture, the whole thing. Lost them 10 minutes in, couldn't get them back. There was just,
Mm.
they just weren't there yet. And I needed another hour to get them to where I was. On the other side, you talk to teachers, okay, group that's always challenged with technology and doesn't always get what they need, but teachers get it innately. Like all the teachers
Yeah.
immediately were a group that just knew how to use AI. They're like, oh my God, now I can send letters to the parents without getting them
Yeah.
angry at me at the end of the day. And my point in that is don't assume the level of adoption of each group. It's about efficacy comes from, a lot of little tool sets in this. So like, my partner, James, his CEO, is an English major. His prompt engineering is brilliant. And I'm a short TLDR guy, right? Like I love the
Yeah.
short thing. So I have to stop and go, what would James do here? Like how do I phrase this in a way that I don't lose the model? And so yeah, we're all a little different. So, thinking like, again, consulting, testing, training, and then measuring how all that's going, and you're going to have some real success with it.
Yeah. Well, Andy, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure having you with us.
Well, it's been great to join you guys and talk a little.
Thanks as always for listening and watching. Don't forget to give us a rating on your podcast player of choice. And listen, we'd really appreciate it if you would share this episode with someone you know would enjoy it. At the end of every episode, we like to ask one of our AI friends to weigh in on the topic at hand. So, hey, Claude, welcome back to the show. Today, we're talking about the end of best practices and why AI demands a new playbook. What do you think?
I think you're onto something. AI is fundamentally changing how we work. The old rulebooks might not cut it anymore when machines can suddenly do things we spent decades optimizing humans to do.
And now, you're in the know. Thanks as always for listening. We'll see you next week with more AI applications, discussions, and experts. Hey, if you made it this far in the episode, first of all, thank you. And second, we know that AI is changing all the time, and so we've got you covered. Here is another great episode for you to watch to stay in the loop on what's happening in AI and business. And second of all, we'd love for you to subscribe. You can do that right here. I've always wanted to do that, by the way. So do that now. That would be great.